everybody, welcome to Marvel Champions Monthly. I am Kennedy Hawk, one of your hosts today. Today we're going to do a special Power Up episode. We haven't done one of those in forever, but with the dawn of mutants in Marvel Champions, we're going to kick them off again and get through all of our Merry Mutants, starting with Shadowcat. So today's special guest is Andy. How's it going, Andy?
It's going great. I just had a baby, so
Oh yeah,
doing really well.
congrats.
Thank
I'm
you so
surprised
much.
you're
Yeah.
not sleeping right now. It's kind of late.
It's sleeping is overrated. This is
It's
too
true.
fun. I've
Sleep
been
or
having
play
like
Marvel Champions. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it's been an amazing couple of weeks of enjoying the baby and then also enjoying Mutant Genesis. It's been beautiful.
Oh, perfectly timed. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
I know because I had time off, so sitting there and normally I play with just the physical cards, but sometimes I've got the baby on my chest and got the computer on my lap and just knocking
Yeah.
out some games on TTS. So
Well,
great.
I have a question for you since we're in the mutant era. If you had a mutant power, what do you think it would be?
Gosh, a mutant power. So of like an existing one,
Or you could just
perhaps.
make up a funny one. Like, I'll give you my example. So, my mutant power
Sure.
would be to have both of my children take a nap at the same time. That would be our power.
That would be an incredible power. Oh gosh. You know, I- I'm gonna say I'm just gonna go. I can't. I'm not very good at answering these questions off the cuff, but I will say I have been really enjoying like watching videos of Shadowcat and getting to know her as like thematically, which is like something I always do because I'm not a super well versed person in Marvel. So every time a new set comes out, it's like a great. I'm like a new person just learning for the first time most of these characters.
Oh,
And so
nice.
yeah, it was really cool to like explain to my daughter like this is Shadowcat. She can phase through things and like she could just phase right through that wall. She could phase through the floor and like seeing her eyes light up as I discussed that and she was like you could go through like a locked door. And I was like, yeah, it's so true. Like locked doors are nothing to her. She can just phase right through all those things. She can grab your hand and phase through the wall with you. So I've just loved that phasing power. It's been really cool to get to know how she uses that.
Nice. All right. Well, we'll get right into it. Today's topic is Shadowcat, so we picked the right player.
Yeah, exactly.
So, do you want to overview her and talk about her gimmick, or do you want me to? How do you want to do this?
Yeah,
This is up to
I'll
you.
overview her. Yeah, I've got a few
Perfect.
notes to share. Yeah,
I just have
again,
the
like I
cards
said,
in front of me. You're more prepared than me.
no. Well, I mean, so for me again, it's like I have to like I really take it seriously to like try and learn the character because I think the more you understand what the cards are supposed to be reflecting, the better. I think like if you know the thematically how she works. So yeah, so Kitty Pryde, aka Shadowcat, is a well-loved member of the X-Men. She was first created as a character who could give like a more relatable perspective as a young member of the X-Men in training at the Xavier Institute. And so her superpower is that she can choose to phase through matter. And this is the whole basis for her mechanics in Marvel Champions. And so initially, like you might hear phase and think vision, right? I know for me, I think for most people who have played Marvel Champions, immediately you're thinking, how different is she from Vision? He phases too. And they do both begin the game with a two-sided mass form, but I would argue that these two are like more dissimilar than even like Ant-Man and the Wasp, who we know are very different, despite both having giant and tiny forms. And one key thing I just want to really point out is that thematically and mechanically, it's that Kitty flips from solid to phased, while Vision flips from dense to intangible. And while Vision, when he's in his dense state, he takes on like a diamond-like density. While in Kitty's solid state, she's only as solid as like you and me, right? Like she's
True.
not phasing, she's just solid. And so she has these two settings, like phased or unphased, while he's basically able to turn the dial so far to one way that he becomes intangible, or so far the other way that he becomes hard as diamond. And so I think that was helpful for me just to even understand thematically and mechanically like what's going on there. She's just a person walking around, but then she can choose to phase through things, and or then go back into normal. Like solid is like normal for her, from what I
Yep.
understand. It's not like Vision where like when he is dense, he is Like you can't touch him. He's really hard to damage him when he's so dense. He like retaliates back at you when he's so dense. So I thought that was really helpful, and that's kind of like my main overview. But I would say, why would you want to play Shadowcat? I want to give maybe my thoughts, and you could share yours.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
for me, why would you want to play her? Because I think for me that's one of the biggest questions to ask now that we have how many heroes do we have? It's like
Way too many.
35,
Well,
like
not too
so
many. We need
many.
more. But yeah,
Yeah, it's so many heroes. So you have to really think like, why do I want to play this one? And I think again, that's why I'm mentioning Vision because I think it'd be easy to be like, oh well, Vision changes forms, so like, why am I using her? Um, so I think the biggest thing, the coolest thing about her is that while she defends in her phased form, she cannot take damage. So
pretty
while she
sweet.
defends in her phase form, she cannot take damage. Yeah, that's wild. It's wild. And it's the basis for almost everything she does. And very quick reminder on how that works. Defending, that includes both if you just do a basic defense, like exhaust your hero to defend, or play any defense traded card while she's being attacked. If she does that, now she's considered defending. And so therefore she just won't take any damage while she's phased. So that is wild. That's the biggest thing I'd say. Another reason to play her is that, like Vision, she can destroy attachments, and this is an effect that the designer is always attached to like phasing, right? Because
Yep, yep.
he can do that as well. And I just think that's amazing because there's some really really nasty attachments out there that she can quite easily and affordably remove. And then the other reason is just that she's one of the most prolific form changers. I would say she's rivaled only by Spectrum. I'd be interested to know who you think changes forms more. Um, but yeah, because her form changing is based on attacking and defending, meaning that she has more varied and interesting and player controlled choices over her form flipping. Like it's not it's not specific cards of hers that necessarily are changing her form. It's just
Gotcha.
the when she's attacking and defending, which I think is really cool because it gives you all these ideas like, ooh, if I included this attack event or this defend event, I could change form at these interesting times and that sort of thing. So I want to hear what you think about how she compares to form changing compared to Spectrum, and any other reasons you think is like this is why you should play Shadowcat.
Yeah, yeah. So Shadowcat, like you said, she's got this phased and mass form, and I wanted to, or phased and solid form, and I wanted to read through those really quick. Like you said, in phased form, it's a
Yeah.
mass form, it's permanent. When she's defending, she cannot take any damage, and it has a forced response that after you attack or defend, you have to flip your form. So you get sort of one attack or defense action in phased form, and then it forces you into solid. And in solid form, she generates a resource with her mass form for attack or defense events. But then it's an optional response after you attack or defend in solid mass form, flip this card. So you can spend as long as you want in solid with that resource generator.
Yep.
But I think it's honestly every single one of her cards, almost every single one of her cards, gains some sort of bonus while you're in phased form. So you want to spend as much time in phased form as possible, meaning you constantly flip, like you said. In
Yep.
Spectrum, a lot of times I feel like I build a deck to stay in one form and like optimize on it, and I might jump to the other one, like if I need thwart or if I need defense randomly. But with Shadowcat and all the decks we talk about today, I'm guessing we sort of figure out some order of operations with her forms where you're like, I want to start in this form, I want to play this
Yes.
event and go to this form, and then play this event and go to this form, and then use my
Exactly.
base attack and go to this form. And it's very sequenced, which some of the players I played with have thought was finicky, but for me, I think that it's like elegant, right? You have to
Hmm.
find the right combination, and when you do, you're like, wow, that went crazy. And if you start in the wrong form, you're just like, what am I doing? So
Right. Exactly. It's so
it's a
true.
little interesting.
Yeah, no, that's okay, cool. I think I agree with you then. I was like I had like written down a note of like she's the most prolific form changer. And then I was like, well, what about Spectrum though? Because she can just do that change speed of light card. But then I totally agree with you. Like I play speed of light with Spectrum like as a matter of course, just because like why wouldn't you? Like you
Yeah,
do it,
to play it
you
twice to
get
flip there and back, right?
yeah, you get a little bonus. You draw a card, so you have more options for what to do. But it's not as like strategic, and it's I think maybe on a given turn she might change form 4 times or whatever. But I mean I've changed form like 6 times with Shadowcat. Like it's crazy like how
And
often you can.
I know Ant-Man flips a lot, but he
Yes, but
wants to
never.
do it once to gain that bonus, maybe play Resize or something like that, right?
Yeah, no. So even I mean Ant Man, it feels like you're flipping all the time, but it's really only once normally,
Yep.
uh, twice
If you have an
occasionally.
event, yeah.
Yeah, and every now and then you might flip 3 times in a turn. Double resize or a resize in a swarm tactics. But
Yep.
that's super rare. Whereas like Shadowcat, is super common. If I could just share one common play pattern.
Yeah.
So a common play pattern for her, she would begin the hero turn in solid. This is extremely common, right? She's often going to be beginning her hero turn in solid. She would then do something like thwart for 2. She has 2/2/2 stats, by the way, which is just great.
Yep.
So she might thwart for 2. Then she would play her card Shadowcat Surprise. So this card is a 2-cost attack event, a superpower as well. Deal 3 damage to an enemy, ready your hero. And so what that would do is she would play that, and she can use the discount from solid. That's her mass form provides a physical resource for attack events in 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 solid form, and she can play that. It'll deal 3 damage, ready Shadowcat, and since it's an attack, you can flip to phase form, but you don't have to. And then whether you want to is going to be like dependent on whether you want to attack or thwart with her now that she's ready again.
Yep.
And so if you want to attack again, you might not want to flip yet. You might want to attack and then flip off of that attack. Or if you want to thwart, you would probably want to flip and then thwart. And now you're going into the villain phase phased. You're in phased form because again, thwarting does not change your form. And so again, you started in solid. You've thwarted or attacked. You've done Shadowcat Surprise, and then you're probably thwarting again. And you're in phased form now. And you almost always want to be phased going into the villain phase, right? Because
Yep.
then there's a card called Quick Shift. You want to read what Quick Shift does?
Yeah, so Quick Shift is a 0-cost event. It's a defense superpower, hero interrupt defense. When an enemy attacks, if you are in solid mass form, change to phased mass form. In phased mass form, draw 2 cards.
Right. And so what will happen there normally is if you were in solid form, you could play it. It'll immediately switch you to phased form. And now you're defending and you are in phased form, so you won't take any damage. So it's like a 0-cost card to play that you are taking no damage, which is cool. But if you're already in phased form, you're now considered defending and you're drawing 2 cards off of it. So it's a net bonus of 1 card.
Mm-hmm.
And you're considered defending. So you won't take any damage, and you didn't even exhaust for that. And then you'll flip to solid, and now you're ready to get that bonus off of the solid mass form to play another attack event, which she has 5 attack events in her kit alone.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of confusion about how defense ends, like when you trigger that. So Shadowcat's form has this forced response, right, that says after you attack or defend in phased mass form, flip this card. Doing an attack is just like you activate to use your ATK, or you play an attack event. When the event is done resolving, you flip back, right? So that's
Yep.
like very simple and clear cut. But with defending, if you activate to use your defense, you're doing that during an attack. That defend doesn't fully resolve. And since this is an after you defend, it doesn't fully resolve until the end of the attack. So if you play this defense event here, which is quick shift, when an enemy attacks you, you become the defender. You don't flip for that until the end of the attack. So yeah, like you said, if you're in phased mass form, you're the defender, you take no damage, you draw 2 cards, and at the end of it, after the attack resolves, is when you'll get that forced flip. So we'll go over it later, I'm guessing, but there's some cards that have attack and defense as their type, and those can
Right.
even flip you twice in one card, which is pretty crazy.
Right.
Um, and flipping, let's be clear, right? Flipping forms just like it was with Spectrum. You can use all those flipping cards like Surprise Attack when you change forms, do this.
Mm-hmm.
Lay down the law when you change forms, remove threat,
Perseverance.
Moxie. All those cards will work with Shadowcat, which is really cool.
Yep. Beautiful. Yeah,
All right.
it's so fun. Well, maybe, do you want to jump into the attack defense one? I mean, that's an amazing or a really interesting
Yeah, yeah. Do you want
card.
to do? Is it your protection deck,
Oh, sure. Let's
or does
let's
she
let's
have
do that
an attack
actually.
defense?
She doesn't exactly, but she does have Shadow and Steel is similar to
Ah,
Powerful
okay. Why
Punch.
don't you go over
But
that? That's the
yeah,
team up card with her and Colossus, right?
yeah. So I'll go over that first. So there's a card that's a team up card called Shadow and Steel. This is a 2 cost event. It's a basic event. Attack. It has attack and defense for the trades. And it says hero interrupt. Sorry, it's a team up Colossus and Shadowcat. So you have to be able to spot Colossus, the hero, or Colossus, the ally, as well as Shadowcat. Hero interrupt, attack defense. When an enemy attacks, prevent all damage from that attack and deal 4 damage to the attacking enemy. So this is interesting because what happens here is that an enemy would attack you. You play this card because when an enemy attacks, you play it. It's going to prevent all damage from that attack and deal 4 damage to the attacking enemy. So that the attack portion of it immediately happens. And so our understanding of the rules is that the attack portion immediately happens. An attack has now occurred. So she will actually change form. If she was in solid, she'd go to phased. If she was in phased, she'd go to solid. And then the rest of the attack resolves. The card says prevent all damage from that attack. So she doesn't actually care about whether she's in phased form or not at that point. But she'll take no damage. And at the end of that, she would then likely flip again off of the defense portion
Yeah.
of it. And so that's how that one works. And there's a very similar card called Powerful Punch in protection. So do you think I should just go over the protection deck and talk
Yeah,
about?
we can talk through Shadowcat's cards as we're going through the decks. I do want to read
Cool.
what her hero abilities are.
Oh yeah,
So
go ahead, do it.
she's 3 recover, hand size 6, 9 hit points, and alter ego with the mutant trait. Setup, you're going to put your mass form into play on solid side. She has the ability phase control, action, flip your mass form upgrade. So you can go to alter ego to flip your upgrade, but you're almost never going to do that. Usually you'll just use the thing that lets you flip it that's built into the card. And then on
Right.
Shadowcat's side, like you said, she has 2 thwart, 2 attack, 2 defense. Great stat line. The X-Men trait and selective intangibility. While you are in phased mass form, Shadowcat ignores guard and patrol keywords and any crisis icons, which has varying degrees of value. If there's no guards or patrol or crisis icons, not very good. If they are out there, she could be a lifesaver. So pretty cool.
That's
All
amazing.
right, let's get
I
into it.
love on the well, just one last thing
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
on her hero card is I really like her alter ego art, and one of the interesting things there, she's working on a computer and she's like taking it apart, which is really funny because it looks like a 90s computer.
Mm-hmm.
Like the tower, um and but so I think that in the comics she gets into computer, like programming and understanding computers, because one thing she can do is that she can phase into like a computer or electronic system and mess with things, and I think travel along it, I think, sort of like Ultron, sort of like Vision. And so I think part of why she gets into computers is that she can better understand what to do while she's kind of phasing through um, an electronic, system, like a computer system, so she could, mess with a system and help the good guys or hurt the bad guys. So just kind of fun. It's a fun
If I
fun
remember that,
alter ego
that
art.
like changes throughout her um, tenure on the X-Men as well. Like I think her phasing started when like she phased through something, it would mess up all the
Right.
electronics, and she didn't know why. And then for a while they were like, "Oh, well, what you're doing is you're shifting your electrons," and they made up some pseudoscience about electricity and computers that the writer clearly didn't understand. And then eventually it became that she could like travel through, the bit drives or whatever. Who knows? I don't know computers well enough, but
Yeah,
yeah,
I don't know
she's
either.
supposed to be like a genius in computer science. So that's pretty cool.
Right. Exactly. Although without the genius trait, which is too bad. Too bad.
Yeah, Moon Girl's crying right
Cool.
now.
Yeah, I know exactly. And ingenuity, right? That
Yeah,
card.
yeah.
So good. Cool. All right. Well, yes, I'll hop right into. So this is the power of Shadowcat, right? So we're going
Yeah, so we're
into
gonna go through a deck in each aspect. I think
right.
you have protection, and then I'll do justice, and then you can do
Great.
aggression, and I'll do leadership because I still have to figure out which of the two versions I built I'm going to use. Because you may have conned
Great.
me into the other one while we were talking.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's great.
Okay,
That's awesome. Well, I will actually we'll send this picture of this to you as well. So I can
nice,
do that.
awesome.
This is this is the protection deck for Shadowcat. So this is a deck that I put together. It's quite similar to one of the top decks on Marvel CDB right now. But it's part of the reason for that is that it's pretty much, I think, a pretty straightforward way for how you would approach a protection deck for her. You'll kind of see why as we're going through it. Um, but with her deck, she has just two allies. So just two allies in this deck. Um, the allies are her signature ally, Lockheed. Would you be able to read off Lockheed, what he does?
Totally. So Lockheed is her pet dragon. So he's a 2-cost ally, which is great. 1/1 stats, not that great. Has the dragon trait and the X-Men trait, which is important, the X-Men trait. He's got a response after Lockheed enters play. If you are in solid mass form, deal 2 damage to an enemy. If you are in phased mass form, remove 2 threat from a scheme. Probably the most disappointing card in her kit because nothing about those forms is associated with damage and thwarting, so it's just kind of like a random effect slapped onto the ally, which is a little disappointing, but it can give you some like versatility. So he's there.
Yeah, I agree. It was a little disappointing on first blush, but for me, I've honestly come to appreciate him. The way I see him is that he normally is going to come in and maybe attack for 1 damage, like clear a toughness and remove 2 threat, something like that. Like that's not bad for a 2-cost ally. And then essentially just keep him in your back pocket as like a break glass defender. Like if all else fails and for some reason she's not able to do what she needs to do, like you can always block with him.
Yeah, totally agreed.
Yes, exactly. That's how I would use him in this deck, especially because he is there's so few allies in this deck, so he'll never be like taking up a spot because I only have 2 allies. So the other ally is Professor X, and so he's there just part of it's like thematic. I have this idea of like he's been like putting here through like these simulations of defensive combat, and so he's just like there. But it's nice to have him too because like he's never gonna be like a total waste, right? Like, and he could potentially confuse, thwart for 3, and block for you. So like, or block for someone else. So he's good. He could be good in multiplayer. And one of the ideas with the allies is I wanted to have no other allies, and that way, like, even Professor X is like a temporary sort of ally, and so she doesn't clash with anyone else at the table who's trying to put together like an X-Men ally deck. So that was one of the ideas for this deck. So this is a great one if your buddy wants to play Cyclops and take all the allies. Like you can play this deck with that. Um, it's got 2 copies of her signature thwarting event, Airwalk, which is a 1-cost thwart. Removes 2 threat from a scheme or 4 threat if you're in phased mass form. That's a lot of threat removal, and so she's going to count on that a lot as she's in protection. It has 3 copies of Defiance. This card is really amazing. So if the villain attacks her while she's in phased form, she can just wait until the boost card comes out, and then before you flip it and see what the boost card is, you play Defiance, discard that boost card, and then she's considered defending, and so she takes no damage and will flip out of phased form. So essentially, Defiance becomes not just a cancel a boost card; it's like a backflip for her. Really. So 3 copies of Defiance. She has 2 copies of her Phase Strike, which is that attack event that I said discards an attachment from the enemy. So it's a 3-cost, deals 6 damage to an enemy. If she's phased, you can also discard an attachment. That's a signature event. 3 copies of Powerful Punch. So this card, I just want to take a short break to talk about what this is. This is very, very similar to that Shadow and Steel card. It's an attack and defense event. It's a 2-cost protection event, attack defense, hero interrupt, attack defense. When an enemy initiates an attack, deal 4 damage to that enemy. So, really cool for her if she's in solid form, not phased form. So, if she's in solid form, she could play Powerful Punch. It'll deal 4 damage to the enemy because it's and since it's an attack, she can actually flip immediately to phase form. And now it's also a defense, so now she's defending. She takes no damage, and then she'd flip back to solid form. Really good in solid. A lot more awkward in phased. And so normally she wouldn't be using this while she's phased. There might be some caveats to that, but normally she would not use that there. Then 3 copies of Preemptive Strike. And this is interesting. Everyone knows Preemptive Strike, but what this can do is you could use this for yourself, but you could also use this actually when someone else is being attacked, like another hero around the table. You could use that, and at a very late notice, when a boost card is flipped up, you could cancel those boost icons, deal damage to the villain, and now she's defending the attack. And if she was in phased form, she's taking no damage at all, which is really cool. She could even, I think one weird thing she could do is she could actually Powerful Punch while she's in phased. No, I don't think she could do what I was about to say. But it's a very cool card. It's cool they can drag. It's cool they can drag attacks to her at such a late point in the attack resolution. She has 2 copies of Quick Shift, which we talked about. That was her card that basically will allow her to defend at super cheap cost.
And that one will also, it's when the villain initiates an attack, but it's another one that lets you steal an attack from another player without exhausting.
Right. You're so right. Yes. I love doing that. So yeah, so she has literally, in fact, Powerful Punch does that too. So she has 8 cards in her deck. Yeah, 8 cards that can steal an attack from someone else without exhausting to defend, which is really wild. That's got to be more than anyone else could do. So, yeah. So then she has 3 copies of Shadowcat Surprise, which is that 3 damage ready 2-cost attack event that I talked about. She has 3 copies of Sidestep, and so this is an interesting one. It's because it would be when you would take any amount of damage, prevent 3 of that damage. If you pay for this card using energy resource, deal 1 damage to that enemy. So just to think through that for a second, if you were in phase form and you weren't defending, you're about to take damage. So then you could play Sidestep to prevent 3 of that damage. But now you're defending, so technically you will take no damage, even if there was more than 3 to prevent. So that's a cool thing. And then in solid, that can help smooth things out when she happens to be in solid and gets attacked. Because you could spend the 1 resource from her solid form to play Sidestep, and now she's prevented some damage, allows her to flip back to phased form if she wants to be there. So that's that. So that's 12 protection events in her kit. So tons of events, and I think those are all. Yes, all 12 of those are defense traded events. Then she has Energy Genius Strength. She has her support is Kitty's Room. That's just her signature support. This is actually a really good support because it's only 1 cost, Alter Ego. Sadly, whatever aspect she plays, she's not going to be in Alter Ego that much. But when she does flip down, in solid form, she can heal 2. In phase form, she can draw a card. And so 1 cost support to always draw a card. That's really good. Or if she really needs the healing, she can do that, which is really cool because sometimes she wants to heal, but she really can't afford to exhaust her hero. She really wants her hero thwarting or attacking. Yeah. So Kitty's Room is great. For upgrades, she has her signature upgrade, Acute Control, which I think is more so than Lockheed, more so than Kitty's Room, definitely her worst card. It's not terrible, but It's her worst card. So one
Really?
cost upgrade. That's my opinion. One cost upgrade. Hero response. After you ignore the guard or patrol keyword on a minion, exhaust acute control. Deal 2 damage to that minion. So in my opinion, I just think there's so few times where you actually will have a guard minion in front of you. And when you do, then you will be ignoring them quite likely. But then you're dealing 2 damage to them, which isn't that much of a reward for like that really rare time where that's happening. I think that this can get a lot more value in certain scenarios, like Claw, you're always having like an armored guard in front of you, although 2 damage is kind of an awkward amount to deal to them, but you're always having an armored guard in front of you. Um, the master mold where they all have guard, all the sentinels
Yeah,
gain
yeah. I think
guard?
so.
Yeah, like I used it earlier today actually playing, and it felt good at that moment. But I just think it's like it's so it's so rare, really, that
I
you get
think if we
used.
see a lot more patrol, it might be
Right.
good, right? Because
Yes.
patrol is you can't thwart the main scheme. So if you are thwarting, you can still push damage onto minions. And what I like about this upgrade the best is when I'm teaming up with someone that's playing Rocket or someone that's playing Wasp, you can get a bunch of minions in front of you at really low health so they can like pick them all off. So it's a really great combo card for multiplayer, but it's not so
Yeah.
great for like Shadowcat herself because if she's ignoring guard, she's probably going to ignore it all game. So it doesn't matter if there's a guard minion there.
That makes sense. That makes sense to me. And also what you just said there with multiplayer too is that like I might ignore the guard minion, go for the head, but then knowing that Rocket is next in turn and he's gonna kill that guard minion. Because otherwise, like if you do leave, I mean, it's really helpful sometimes to be able to ignore a guard minion, but leaving minions in front of you still hurts, and a lot of guard minions are still dealing a fair amount of damage.
Yep,
And
yep.
so you're right that if someone else is gonna take care of them, which Rocket could even, or Thor could like hang on to an into the fray, and so he might be going before you, but then he'll finish your guard minion after you've softened them up with acute control. So you're right, and if patrol, you're right. If there's more patrol minions, which there are just so few right now, that could be awesome to thwart, ignore the patrol, and then
And
deal
then get
damage
to
to
push
that
damage
minion.
still,
Yeah,
right? Because
that's
then
that's really cool. That's cool. So there's that, and then I have a copy of Deft Focus. She has so many superpower cards in her deck, and
I
it
think she has
feels
9 that cost 1 or more, and
yeah,
then 2 zero
yeah,
cost ones. So like it
yeah.
reduces the cost of a quarter of your deck right off the bat. Basically, there's no reason to not. Yeah,
And a ton of them you're just are ones you want to play all the time. Like Shadowcat Surprise, whenever you draw it, you could just play it for free with Solid and Def Focus, quite likely. And that feels so good to get 3 damage and a ready as a zero cost card, essentially. Feels so good. Um, Great. I have a copy of Electrostatic Armor. So this is after you defend against an attack, deal 1 damage to the attacking character. So again, 12 defense events. So she'll basically be defending every single villain phase. And so this should be triggering every single villain phase. Flow Like Water is very similar. It costs 2, play under any player's control, maximum player. After you play a defense card, deal 1 damage to the attacking enemy. And so with that, you might actually combo up a couple cards occasionally. Like sometimes I might play um, a powerful punch, but now I'm in solid form and about to take damage. Then I play uh, preemptive strike to lessen some of the damage, and now I've just played 2 defense events within one defense, and I've dealt
yeah.
two damage with flow like water. So that can be handy. 3 copies of Hard to Ignore. She can remove so much threat with Hard to Ignore. I don't know if there's any hero that feels better with Hard to Ignore, because she feels like she can afford to get them out. Some heroes like are struggling. They're like, I gotta take care of these other things. I don't really want to play my Hard to Ignores. She gets them out as soon as she gets them, like plays them, because she's gonna defend every villain phase, and she might never flip down. So she's I've had times where I'm like, oh, I can flip down now. He's confused. Everything's all set up here. It's a super safe time to flip down. And I'm like, why would I flip down? I'm gonna remove 3 threat and do all sorts of other stuff like when the villain attacks. I'm not gonna flip down. So 3 hard to ignores are gonna just remove threat from the main scheme. So remember that's from the main scheme. So probably using her basic thwarting and her um, air walking to deal with side schemes. She has her intangible interference, which is very similar to acute control. So 1 cost upgrade. After you ignore the crisis icon on a scheme, exhaust intangible interference, remove 2 threat from that scheme. I feel like this is still not, to me, I don't love it, but I just think it's a lot more common that you'd actually use this rather than acute
Definitely
control.
better
Just
than
because,
the guard minion one. Yeah.
yeah, because crisis affects everyone. So any crisis side scheme that comes out, it's a valid target that would for this. Whereas guard minions like it has to come out specifically for you, and so that it's there. Um, and then a copy of Nerves of Steel. So the cool thing here is Nerves of Steel, of course, generates a energy resource for a defense event. And again, she has 9 of her protection events can use it. So typically she's going to have one of those in hand for her. And 3 of those 9, I should remind you, are Powerful Punch. Powerful Punch is attack and defense. And so it can still be used, even though you're probably, when you play it, you're thinking about the attack. Like, that's the first thing that's happening. But remember that it's a defense. So you can use Nerves of Steel and your Solid to play Powerful Punch for free,
And if
which
you
is,
have an
yeah,
aggression friend, you could use Nerves of Steel and Martial Prowess
martial
on the
prowess.
same event.
Exactly.
That'd be crazy.
That's the dream. That's the dream. I want that to happen. And now she also has 2 copies of Phased and Confused, which is hero form only, attached to an enemy, max 1 per enemy. Be thinking about Webbed Up. It's very similar to Webbed Up. Forced Interrupt, when attached to enemy would attack, discard this card instead, then confuse that enemy. I would say it's definitely better than Webbed Up
It's
because it
similar to Web Up,
costs,
but it's cheaper, right?
it's cheaper, and I think it's my opinion is that a confuse is very often higher value than a stun. Yeah, just I mean, there's so many.
In Kitty's situation, it might not be because she so rarely flips down because you barely ever take
Yeah,
damage.
yeah.
It might not seem like it, but if you can confuse for anybody else or to prepare for that advance, it's really, really good.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And now with this deck, I would say, like you just said, probably not the best for her, and not always the best, not always best for her, and not always best in this deck where you want to get attacked a lot. But occasionally, it's still going to be worthwhile to play in this deck. And then a copy of Ready to Rumble, which is you should probably have at least 1 copy of this, is my opinion. And it's the after you change form, ready your hero, like a 1 cost, ready basically whenever you really need it. Just having that in your back pocket is great. And then she has a copy of Unflappable, which is of course the drawing a card after she defends and takes no damage. Which more than any hero, it's likely that she's just not going to take damage when she defends because it's not like Spider-Man or Captain America where they can guarantee that only 2 cards.
Yep.
She can guarantee that anytime. And I think it's important to remember there's all these defense events, but like just doing a basic defense with her is not a bad use of her of her exhausting. Like you're exhausting and you are if there's ways you can do it without exhausting, great. But exhausting to then defend, take no damage, draw a card from Unflappable, remove 3 threat from hard to ignore, and deal 1 or more damage with electrosec armor, maybe flow like water. It's crazy. So, yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it's if you want to play, like if you want to just like forget the allies for a little bit, go ahead, try this deck. It's super fun.
Sweet.
Thoughts, questions?
No, I love it. So what would be a good villain scenario people should take this deck into to really show off its strength? Something with
Okay,
like
let me
lots of activations, or what's the best way to do it?
Gosh, I've played this against a lot of different heroes, and she it's just really good. Like I was always cautious. I'm always cautious with a protection deck, right? Because like you want to think, okay, like can it really handle when there's a lot of minions, or can it handle when there's a lot of threat on the board? One thing that is just so good is Shadowcat Surprise is so good because what it really allows you to do is you could, if a side scheme comes out, like what's the four threat hazardous side scheme in Claw. That one's always a just a
Oh
jerk.
gosh.
The illegal arms factory, is that what
Yes.
it is?
Yeah. Arms
Yeah,
Factory.
yeah. So if that one comes out, you thwart for 2, play Shadowcat Surprise to deal 3 damage to, a minion, and then it readies her and you thwart for 2 again. So she can handle side schemes just without any, special cards. Or if speaking of Claw, if the big 7 HP radioactive man, is that what it is?
Yeah. Yeah.
Minion, he comes out, attack for 2, Shadowcat Surprise for 3 damage, ready, attack for 2 more damage. And so she's really suited to like deal with the issues that come up with attacking or defending, or sorry, attacking or thwarting. And so I mean I think you could do it with anything. Maybe Claw. Just try Claw, good old Claw. See how she holds up against him. He's still hard, obviously. She doesn't make
I got a
him
challenge
a
for you. You
pushover.
ready for this?
What's that? Yes, go
You're
ahead.
gonna do crossbones. So you've got all those low scheme thresholds. So you've got to be able to remove with hard to ignore like right away.
Yep.
He's gonna have Weapon Master, so he gets like 6 extra activation cards.
Yes,
Um,
he does.
so Crossbones with Weapon Master and Armadillo from Nova's pack because it's going to put a bunch of tough
Ooh,
on the villain. So you've got
yeah,
to
that's
count
tough.
on your electrostatic armor to get rid of the tough. So
Mhm,
you've still got
mhm.
all the answers, but you got to find them in the right order. And you're going to take damage from that rifle when you start, and you can pick whatever you want for. I think he does 3 mods, right? So you could do whatever for the third one. But I think
Yeah.
Armadillo with I can't remember what I just said. Weapons Master and Crossbones would be really interesting.
Oh,
Could be
what's
a
the
good
third?
challenge. What's a
What's
good
the third
third
mod?
one?
Yeah.
Oh, what's something that like puts threat out when it comes out? Does temporal those little time displaced soldiers? Do they have insight 1?
The time displaced soldiers are in Master of Time, and they do
Oh,
have Insight 1.
let's put that one in there. Problem
Oh
solved.
gosh, Master of Time. That's amazing. That's great. I love Master of Time. I'm a big Kang person, so this is great. Okay, cool. I will try that against that. And what you've forgotten is that is that she'll be able to phase through his attachments and just knock out a bunch of his things.
Only the
So
hero action ones, right? So like
yes,
she can't
exactly.
get rid of
Not
the rifle.
not the
She
machine
can't
gun.
get rid
Yes.
of. There's one other one I think, but most of them she can get rid of. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So that'll be really fun. Cool. I will try it out. I'll report back and see how she does
Okay.
against
I'm
crossbones.
stoked.
Cool. Yeah. What's your deck?
Okay, let's do justice next. Um,
Hmm.
so my justice deck is pretty standard. So a lot of Kitty's interactions, unfortunately, have to do with attacking, and they have to do with defending. And there are attacks in justice, but that's not the strength I wanted to lean into. I thought I'd let aggression and protection handle that. So instead, we're going to lean into her hero ability, which is while you're in phased form, you can ignore the crisis icon. So this deck is all about like a 3-ish card combo. So you're going to play one way or another and go fish out something with the crisis icon. Normally, you would never take something with a crisis icon because it's going to cause problems for you. But your goal is that you're going to always be thwarting in phased form. So you can not worry about the crisis icons and just bring them out and draw 3 cards. So you play one way or another, which is a 0-cost event from Nebula. Search the encounter deck for a side scheme, reveal that side scheme, and draw 3 cards. So hopefully you've drawn into Mutant Peacekeepers and turn the tide. So Mutant Peacekeepers is from Phoenix's pack. Play only if your identity has the X-Men trait, Hero Action Thwart. Exhaust your hero and any number of X-Men allies. Remove X threat from among schemes in play, where X is the total thwart of those characters. So since this is a thwart event, it's like an extension of your hero thwarting. So you can take all your ally thwarts, basically add them to Shadowcat's base thwart of 2, and just continuously bypass all of these crisis icons. So it's definitely more of a multiplayer deck. You're going to be like the threat controller and make sure the main scheme never pops, and you might bring up some side schemes to defeat along the way. But for the most part, you're going to use the side schemes as like income. So this deck has 6 allies. It has Angel, who's just a 2-cost ally when you have the mutant or X-Men traits. It's got Banshee, Blindfold, Eros, Lockheed, and Jessica Jones. And there's a reason that you want to have Jessica Jones in there. So Jessica Jones is from the core set. I'm trying to find her text here really quick. So Jessica Jones gets +1 thwart for each side scheme in play. So she starts at 1 thwart, but if you've pulled out 3 or 4 schemes with one way or another, she's going to be like a 5 thwart character.
Yeah,
And I
that's
believe
awesome.
in the comics, Jessica Jones is a mutant, so I'm still calling Theme, even though I have Eros in the deck as another 2-cost ally.
Oh, I'm just getting the connection because then she can actually add her thwarting to
Sort of.
kitties for mutant peacekeepers, right?
Yeah, so Mutant Peacekeepers requires you to exhaust your hero and any number of X-Men allies. So we do
Okay.
include 2 copies of honorary X-Men because we want to be
Yes,
able to
yes.
make Eros or Jessica Jones
That's
honorary
awesome.
X-Men to work with Mutant Peacekeepers.
Okay, that
Um,
is really cool.
So yeah, so for events, you've got all your Kitty Pride events, which we've gone over. So Airwalker, Thwart Event, Phase Strike, Quick Shift, and Shadowcat Surprise, which again is going to be a really important card. We'll talk about why. But then we've got 3 copies of Mutant Peacekeepers, 3 copies of One Way or Another, and I have 2 copies of Turn the Tide because I wanted to keep it to a 40 card deck and have 2 honorary Avengers. You can kind of take your mix of those cards. If you don't want to go the Jessica Jones route, you could probably put in more copies of Turn the Tide, or you could just run a 41 card deck and no one would yell at you. Um, for resources, I only have Energy Genius and Strength. For supports, I have the X Jet because none of these cards have a requirement, but you do have a pretty high cost curve as Kitty. You've got a lot of 3-cost cards in her kit. I think you've got 4 3-cost cards and 4 2-cost cards. Plus, you want to play all of those allies, so you've got a pretty steep setup that you want to get through. For upgrades, we have the 2 that you talked about, the 2 Phased and Confused. I have a copy of Deft Focus as well, because you're hitting 9 cards. There's no reason not to do it. I have 1 copy of Heroic Intuition, so you can get Kitty to 3 right away. So even if you have Kitty and Blindfold out, Mutant Peacekeepers is now a 5 thwart that bypasses Crisis Icons, which can probably manage the threat for the turn unless people are flipping too much, and you're just keeping Blindfold out there forever as like a battery, which is pretty cool. I've got 2 copies of Honorary X-Men, 1 for Eros and 1 for Jessica Jones. Since you don't have Utopia, you're letting the leadership player have that. Um, you're probably not going to end up with both of them out, but typically I end up with Banshee. Not always Banshee. I usually end up with Blindfold, Jessica Jones, and then 1 other ally. Those are the like targets because they're at pretty good levels. I've got 2 copies of Mission Training, so that's attached to an X-Men ally,
Mm.
max 1 training upgrade. It increases their thwart even more, so you can get Blindfold up to 3 thwarts or Jessica Jones up to like 1,000,000. Um, I have 1 copy of Sense of Justice because that's going to make your mutant peacekeepers free. That's always good. And I put 1 copy of Under Surveillance just in case there's a turn you can't thwart. You can like basically like ignore all the crisis icons you've put out and still put the van on the main scheme.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, so the goal is like you're going to start every villain phase again in phased form because you want to defend against the villain if you can. Ideally, you use quick shift to defend against the villain, but it could also be a basic defense. If you're going to do a basic defense, you want to, if you have mutant peacekeepers in your hand, you want to make sure you have a way to ready. So you might want to include 1 copy of Ready to Rumble. I usually counted on Shadowcat Surprise to ready me, so then I would defend, which would flip me to phased form or solid form. When my turn starts, I would play Shadowcat Surprise to attack and ready my hero, and I'd end up in phased form. And then I can use Mutant Peacekeepers for 1,000,000, and I don't have to flip back because I'm not forced to flip on thwarting. So you're looking for like 1 big thwart every turn, and that big thwart is from Mutant Peacekeepers. So I was playing a bunch of Shadowcat games this week to like practice for this episode, and I decided to play a game. I can't remember who the villain was, but I put in galactic artifacts, and at one point I had 6 side schemes out, which was pretty
Oh my
exciting
god.
for Jessica Jones because she could just knock side schemes out. But we were just like, it was like a 3-player game, and we were just every turn it was like mutant peacekeepers for 7, mutant peacekeepers for 9, mutant peacekeepers for 11,
Oh
and
my gosh.
people were like flipping down to see if they could like get me worried, and I'm like, no, it's okay, I got it. We'll
That's
figure it out.
incredible. That's incredible. I
So
love that. That's
it's hard.
awesome.
I almost left like 3 empty slots at the end because you can bring Turn the Tide to push a little bit of damage. You can
Right.
also bring Game Time, which is like a 0 cost event from Cyclops' pack where you ready an ally that has a training. So if you
Mhm.
get Honorary Avenger on Jessica Jones and she gets up to like 7 thwart, and maybe you can't thwart enough, you can always thwart once with her for 7 and then game time her and thwart again for 7, which is a little
Wow.
insane. But you're
That's
living
amazing.
life dangerously. You're leaving 6 side schemes out there, so you're like, it's definitely a risk reward play style.
That's really, really fun. And you know what's cool is that game time can be played by someone else on you, or
Yeah.
on Jessica, right? And
Yep.
also, what's wild, I always forget about this, but Ready to Rumble can also be played on another player. And so
Oh,
just make
I
someone
always
else
forget
do it,
about
bro.
that.
So, yeah,
Yeah,
make someone
yeah,
else
somebody else
be
can
like,
bring that for me.
yeah, she needs a tutor, like another player needs to like teach her how to Ready to
Yeah,
Rumble.
I'm taking care
She's
of the
gonna
main scheme. Don't ignore the pile of hazard icons I brought out. It's not a
exactly.
problem. I'm gonna defend one
That's
time.
really
I'll be okay.
fun. Yeah,
Um,
that's so fun. So to bring it back to like the key thing being that like when she thwarts in phase form, she ignores crisis. And mutant peacekeepers, since it's an event, it's her as a hero
performing a thwart.
thwarting. Yes, and so she ignores crisis icon, and yeah, that's amazing. That's really really
Yeah.
amazing.
So you can sort of do twofold things, right? You never want to get rid of Jessica Jones because you're constantly bringing schemes out with one way or another, because that lets you cycle your deck really fast. So you're seeing it a ton and you're seeing Mutant Peacekeepers a ton. But the other allies, like if you have a Jessica Jones that's like 5 thwart that you can add to your base 3 with Heroic Intuition, if you can thwart for 8 with Peacekeepers, you're probably fine. So the other
Yeah,
allies like Blindfold and Lockheed, you can just keep cycling these 2 cost allies in and blocking. So you can like help the defensive player and be like the control player in the same deck as long as you can keep like one really pumped up ally out there.
yeah. I love that, and what's cool about her is that I've just found her really really forgiving in terms of like if you have a plan to do things one way, like if things get thrown at you, she's I just think she's really good at if you can maneuver it, like you can pretty well change direction and like go a different way. So like you were just saying, like if you're not making the mutant peacekeepers thing work, then suddenly Jessica Jones is working in a different way, like
Yeah,
yeah,
you can
or
knock those
heroic
side schemes
intuition.
off real fast. That's the other
Yeah,
nice thing
yeah,
is that with mutant peacekeepers, you divide it amongst the schemes as you choose. So if you have more threat than there is in the main scheme, you can get a bunch of those side schemes down to like 1. So if something happens and you're like, oh crud, we got to get rid of these 4 crisis icons because I'm stuck in mass form, you can thwart them away with your allies because you've like lowered them
yes,
all to 1 over time. Um,
yeah. Oh, that's
but you
cool.
get
Okay,
really
so it's
mad when
really
your
easy.
teammates
Mhm.
thwart them away because your Jessica Jones gets weaker. So it's a little funny.
That's
Um,
awesome.
I
What a fun
tried to
deck.
build a deck with like concussive blow to take advantage of her like physical resource, and it didn't flow for me because it was too expensive to fit with her other 3 cost cards without taking additional resources. And then I saw Mutant Peacekeepers and I was like, oh, bypass crisis sounds super fun.
Yes,
And
that's
don't
so
forget you
fun.
can bypass patrol as well. But again, patrol is only if it's like engaged with you, and if you're planning on thwarting every turn, somebody else better kill the minions in front of you. So it
Yes, that's the
doesn't
objective.
help
Yeah,
a ton.
that's really really fun. Cool. And you said you took it up against the galactic artifacts.
I took up against
Um,
Galactic Artifacts a couple times. I haven't tried taking it out against one that doesn't have a lot of side schemes or that only has
yeah,
hazards. I think that would be really hard, right? So like Rhino's fine because he's got crisis control. But if you find a deck that has like 4 side schemes, but all of them are a hazard icon, you can't really afford to let them sit out there. So then you have to pivot and you have to use like what's it called? The training upgrade on Blindfold instead. And you can still Mutant Peacekeepers to keep Blindfold out there forever, and she can block when you need to, but you're not taking advantage of that like crisis icon ability. So if there's
Yeah.
no crisis icons, this is just a generic Justice removes threat deck, which it still is
Yeah.
fine, right? That's what Justice is supposed to do. But it shines when you're playing that risk reward life, or like in campaigns when you start with like a side scheme or 2 side schemes out, you're just like mulliganing really hard for Jessica Jones. Want to find her, want to get her in
Yes.
play.
Yes. Exactly.
So
That's awesome. And you know what? I feel like these days, like, there's so many options for what kind of scenario to set up. Like, I think it makes total sense to have a deck like this though, where you're like, I'll use this when I know there's gonna be a bunch of side schemes, or I'm gonna specifically put together like a fun challenge, like because like you said too, it's still risky. It's not like, oh, I'm gonna make this scenario easier for myself by putting in galactic artifacts. Like galactic artifacts is tough. Like it's there's a lot of crazy stuff in that modular set. So I think it's really that's a really fun, high risk, high reward
we
style of
played
play.
one game where we ended up with 3 amplify icons out,
Oh
but
gosh.
the other player was Colossus. So I was like, that's okay.
Perfect. Yeah,
Colossus is
perfect.
going to soak everything with tough. I'm
Yeah.
going to make everything 0, and we're just going to let the amplifies sit there. But then Colossus
I
got
have
stuck in Alter Ego 1 turn, and I can't remember who it was. It was somebody like Sabretooth schemed for like 9, and I was like, oh my god, that was bad. this, was,
it,
this was
it's
tough.
it's like she basically ignores amplify in phase as well because she, since
Yeah.
she canceled all damage, I just playing there's a good amount of amplify I thought in Mutant Genesis, and I just would ignore those. I didn't care. Like I'm not taking damage from these people, and I'm not flipping down, so they're not scheming. So yeah, that's wild though. I
Well,
love that. Wow.
let's get back
Great
to
deck.
attacking and hear about aggression. I'm excited.
Yes. Okay. So this is aggression. So power of Shadowcat aggression. A big thing for this is I'll start going through it. Well, thematically, here's the idea: is that Kitty's just showing Riri around the X Jet, right? When the call comes in, like time to gear up, strike back
Nice.
hard, and like wait, pulse grenades wouldn't hurt to pack a few, right? Like that's the idea. So in this deck, you've got for allies, you have Angel, great ally for her. Colossus, Ironheart, Lockheed, Professor X. So a few X-Men hanging out, and Ironheart's just seeing the big jet engines on the X-Jet when things go down. For the events, of course, she has all her signature events, but then for her, the rest of the events are 2 copies of Clobber, 2 copies of Mean Swing, 1 copy of Shadow and Steel, that team up card for Colossus, and then 3 copies of Surprise Attack. So, like you mentioned, Surprise Attack is the after you change form, deal 3 damage to an enemy, 4 damage instead if you paid for this card using a physical resource. It's just so good for her. So, like, one of the big things that this deck can do is she could defend in phased form, either with quick shift or just exhausting to defend. After the defense concludes, she flips to solid form, and then she can pay with the physical resource from solid. She can pay for surprise attack since she just changed form, deal 4 damage, and then flip right back to phased, and maybe use ready to rumble right then. Just discard that so that now she's readied again, and she could defend again, take a whole nother hit if the villain attacks again. Clobber is really fun because it's such a cheap event. Like it's 2 cost, but really once you play it, if it's the first card you played, you get it back. So it's 3 damage for really one cost. She has energy, genius, strength, 2 copies of the power in all of us. And the reason for that is that Shadow and Steel is a basic card. She has 4 allies. She has 4 more copies of cards that benefit from that as well. So lots of targets for power in all of us. For support, she has Kitty's Room and she has the X Jet, which again, that wild resource is actually helpful for her because sometimes she's playing 2 surprise decks in one turn. So having another card that creates a wild resource is helpful to get the full value out of surprise attack. Um, she has acute control and intangible interference and phased and confused. All her signature upgrades. She has a copy of Death Focus, which again I just think you should almost always just pack one in with her. You have a copy of Martial Prowess, which she has so many attack events that it's great for that. You then have 3 copies of Pulse Grenade. And so Pulse Grenade, if you remember, this is a upgrade weapon with a hero action attack. Discard Pulse Grenade and choose an enemy. Discard the top 2 cards of the encounter deck. Deal 1 damage to the chosen enemy for each boost icon discarded this way. So the idea that I had here was I looked through like all the cards, all the cards out there, and I was trying to find what is a card that goes on the table that has like an on-command attack on it. And I'm pretty certain this is the only card. Can you back me up on that?
I don't know if that's. I need to check. Hold on. That's the Star-Lord?
So it's in Star-Lord. Yep. There are other cards that like counterattack, for example, has attack on it, but like it has to be after you've taken damage from an attack. Even the
Pulse
Justice,
Grenade is an attack.
right? Yeah, it's an
Yeah,
attack, and I
so there's like the little laser rifle that I think is in Venom. That's the only other one I can think of.
so no, so I double checked that, and at least I'm Marvel CDB, unless I mixed that up. It's not an attack. I thought it was, but
I
it's
think I'm
not.
mixing them up because I thought that Pulse Grenade wasn't, and it clearly is. So
Yeah, so
I think
Pulse,
you
yeah.
found it.
So I think it is, yeah. So it's cool. I mean, like it's just having that, like it's kind of random because it's like, well, do you really need this? But it just smooths things out just ever so slightly to where like if you've got a pulse grenade and you're in the wrong form at the wrong time, like you got to get back to, you're in solid, but you want to flip to phased so that you can do a phase strike and, knock off their attachment, like things like that. Um, it's just providing you one more chance to flip really on command. And there's really no other card that does that I know of. And so that's the whole idea is like leaning into this like really unique thing. And then also doing that in aggression um because also mean swing that
Yep.
event can exhaust the pulse grenade because it's also a weapon. So it's a weapon and it's an attack. And so mean swing and she will be doing basic attacks. Like she really will. And so she can and then she has 2 copies of Ready to Rumble as the last cards in her kit. So just to like lay out how they can look, like a possible mid to late game turn after you like defend with quick shift, you draw, 2 cards. Now you have a 6-card hand and you're in solid form. You could spend a double resource, right? Like energy, genius, or strength to play clobber for 3 damage. And you could choose to flip back to phased form. Since you're flipping, you can use martial prowess to play surprise attack for 4 damage, flipping you back to solid form. Then you could thwart for 2. You could use solid and deft focus to play Shadowcat surprise for 3 damage and ready Shadowcat, flipping back to phased form if you like. Then you could basic attack with Shadowcat for 2 more damage and exhaust pulse grenade to use mean swing for 5 damage, flipping back to solid form if you flip to phased. Then you can attack with the pulse grenade for some more damage and flip back to phased. Then use Ready to Rumble to ready Shadowcat again. Then thwart with Shadowcat for 2. And then finally end your turn by spending that clobber that you had gotten back into hand to play Airwalk for another 4 threat removal, or play a Ready to Rumble, whichever like card you had. Airwalk, Ready to Rumble.
And you could have threw
That's like
surprise attacks in there like crazy, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's like that's like a ton of damage, ton of threat removal, and all of it's ignoring, most of it's ignoring guard, patrol, crisis. It's dealt out in tiny, small, tidy packages. Yeah, it's really fun. I think this is the deck that I've done the most, like one turn flipping, in the hero phase, I should say.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I I didn't catch if you said this or not, but I used to run pulse grenades and mean swing and Hawkeye all the time. And my
oh
favorite thing
yeah,
is that Pulse Grenade doesn't require you to exhaust the grenade to perform its attack.
Yes,
So
exactly,
you can
exactly.
mean swing and explode the Pulse Grenade. Yeah, okay. You must have said that already. But
No,
yeah,
I didn't mention
okay.
that other than like it was like the assumption in the list of things. But no, exactly. That was another. It's like Pulse Grenade has everything you want in it because you can exhaust it for mean swing and still discard it that same turn to get another form change. Yeah, so it was really fun to figure that out. And so what's cool for her is I feel like I love heroes that have um one like a thing about them where every new set that comes out, you're gonna be like looking through that set with like laser eyes, trying to figure out, oh wait, this is an upgrade that technically is an attack, and so this is like something I could use to smooth things out for Shadowcat. I love heroes that have like that future sets are gonna have new cards that make them like come to life again in a new way.
Hmm.
So that's
I'm a
that's
big
my
fan of
aggression.
Pulse Grenade, so this makes me really happy. It's actually making me
Great.
think about all those cards that's after your hero attacks a villain, spend these resources to discard something. Pulse Grenade, just let it sit there on a stick until you need it, right? So
Yes,
I
absolutely.
oh, I'm so excited.
Great. Yeah, try it out. Try it out. And
So
I'll tell you one. Okay, here's my challenge for you for what you should try it out against.
okay, okay, good, good,
Okay, so Magneto, um, standard Magneto, not in the
good.
campaign.
I'm a big fan of
Uh,
standard right now.
yes,
After
yeah, yeah,
after playing
absolutely.
Sabretooth enough, I could use some standard in my life.
Totally. Yep. Yep. So it's standard Magneto. Switch out acolytes and put in sentinels. But now
Okay.
here's one no here's one little like change though. Um each sentinel gains magnetic. And so
Okay.
yeah, so what that means is that his really what that fundamentally means is that his main scheme like ability will be grabbing uh um will be putting out sentinels on occasion.
Yeah.
And yeah, which is mean because then they're going to immediately attack you. But also, then it's much more likely that he'll draw um, magnetic missile and
Yep.
actually have it proc. Because normally, I just it always surges for me because I'm always if a sentinel comes out, I'm clearing it, and it's never alive at the time that an encounter card's coming out, and so this makes it more likely that there will be one. And so that's my challenge for you. One extra little additional challenge if you want to like roll build for that scenario. So like taking a random roll card from your chosen roll,
Oh, nice.
and
Yeah.
then like doing the whatever aspect cards you want. Um, if you want to roll build, you can, but if you do, you have to shuffle Nimrod into the encounter deck, who's
Ah,
also
okay.
a sentinel. So that's your
More more
little
brutalness
thing.
for you. Nice.
Yes, exactly. So I did that, and the first time I did it, I mentioned this to somebody and they were like, "Oh, that's gonna stink to have Nimrod." But I was like, "But hey, but no, maybe he'll die to a magnetic missile." And sure enough, first time playing it against him, Nimrod came out and then immediately Magneto hurled him at me as a magnetic missile, which was nasty, but also like I'd much rather have the 5 damage than
Than
having
the
to deal
Nimrod.
with
Yeah,
Nimrod.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's pretty
exactly.
humorous.
So yeah. So yeah, that's my aggression deck. Try it out.
All right. Are you ready for the craziness that is a Shadowcat leadership deck?
I'm so ready. You are the master of leadership. I bow before you, and I'm
All
so
right.
ready for
Well, I
this. Yeah.
made two leadership decks. We won't go over the first one because it was a bad one. It used
Yeah.
it relied on the ability that Shadowcat never takes damage, so you don't need allies to block for you. So you can use your allies to just pump out damage and thwart. So it was using like Last Stand to like just dump allies in the board and attack with them. But
Nice.
I was convinced to use Band Together instead. So I built a different deck. Um, so this deck has 7 allies because you are using Band Together, so you want to draw into them. So it's got Angel, Colossus, and Ironheart from Basic. It's got Kalu to go find events. We'll talk about what events later. Maria Hill and Beast, because Beast can go find that band together. Because one of the big problems with Band Together is you want to bring 3 of them, because once you have 3 allies on the board, they're worth 3 resources. But if you bring 3 of them, there's a good chance you'll have one on your opening hand when they're worth 0 resources. So for resources, I bring 2 band together, Energy, Genius, and Strength, because I'm hoping to not draw into one until I have at least 2 allies on the board. But then I can recur Beast, and he can keep grabbing a 3 resource card for me, which is nice. So for upgrades, I have Deft Focus, obviously, 2 copies of Rapid Response. So we're going really hard into events and supports because we haven't listed a lot of
Yes.
cards yet. So for supports, I have the X-Jet because you are going to need resources, and there's a little bit of resource matching we're going to have to do. And then we have 2 copies of R&D Facility because Shadowcat is a 2/2/2, and R&D Facility is a 3-cost shield support location from Ironheart. It requires you to spend 2 mental to get it out. So you're going to want to use X-Jet, and then Shadowcat has a lot of mental in her kit, so that should help. But hero action, exhaust it and remove 1 research counter from it. Choose a character to give +1/+1. So you could make Shadowcat a 3/3/2 until the end of the phase. And then we already talked about Shadowcat Surprise is deal 3 damage and ready your character. So you could attack for 3, use Shadowcat Surprise to ready, and then attack for another 3. That seems pretty good, but it gets better. So we're going into events now. So we've got 3 copies of Moxie. Because you're going to be flipping so much, Moxie gives you +1 to each of your stats for the round. So you can get Shadowcat up to like a 3/3/3, and then with R&D Facility, that's a 4/4/3, which is a pretty good stat line for the other cards from Ironheart's pack. So we have 3 copies of Go All Out, which is a
Yes.
2-cost attack event that again requires a lightning bolt resource, so you really need X-Jet to get your resource matching. And it's hero action, exhaust your hero, deal damage to an enemy equal to the combined hero's thwart, attack, and defense. So if you can get 1 Moxie off, that's a 2-cost 9 damage attack to an enemy, which is pretty good. So ideally, what you would do, right, is you would start in phased form. You'd defend either with an event or by exhausting, and then flip to alter ego form. You would play. I guess you would probably want to you'd end up playing Moxie to pump your stats. You'd end up using Go All Out to go crazy. It's also got 3 copies of Push Ahead. So it's the same thing as Go All Out, but it's thwarting instead of damaging. So it's 3 cost, it makes a lightning bolt resource, and then it requires 1 mental. So there's a lot of resource matching in your events and in your supports. Hero action, thwart, exhaust your hero, remove threat from the scheme equal to the total of your hero's thwart, attack, and defense. So here again, you're trying to thwart for 11, trying to thwart for 9 by using a Moxie or use an R&D Facility. So you're going to be a leadership player that's trying to get 2 allies out and then a 3rd ally that you can block with. So you can do the normal leadership thing and block for people. But then you want to keep 2 allies out because then Band Together can play Go All Out for you. It can play 2 of the resources for Push Ahead, and you've only got to spend 1 resource on it from X-Jet. So as long as you have a Band Together in one of those events in your hand and 2 allies on the board, you can do a pretty big attack. So ideal turns with it, right, would be start in solid form, do a basic attack for 2, flip to phased form, and play Moxie. Play Shadowcat Surprise in phased form to deal 3 and flip back, and then use Band Together to do Go All Out or Push Ahead. So you can do like a base attack of 3, or a base attack of 2, play your Moxie, a Shadowcat Surprise for 3, and then one of your big event guns, your Go All Outs or Push Aheads. So you're going to need an X-Jet down, you're going to need a resource in hand, but luckily you've got Beast to fish them out. So I have 2 rapid responses in there specifically for recurring Beast or for like oh darn buttons when you need to block with 2 allies, but you
Yep.
know you want 2 on the board for Band Together. So usually with Band Together, I want 3 allies, but here, like if you can get to 2, it lets you play Go All Out. If you can get to 3, then you can play Push Ahead for free. And like we mentioned, Shadowcat has a lot of 3-cost cards. So your Phased and Confused are 3 costs. Your Phased Strike, if you're going to deal 6 damage and discard a attachment, are 3 cost. Your R&D facilities are 3 cost. Your X jet is 3 cost. So your push ahead is 3 costs. So I think you've got a total of 11 3 cost cards in your deck and 12 2 cost cards. So you want to be in that 2 to 3 ally range, but I think with 2, you'll be pretty happy still. So it's
I love
using
it.
Shadowcat's base stats. It's pretty fun. It's a little bit wonky. I was playing it with Power of Leadership before because I had like Last Stand and some other stuff in here, but I got convinced to use Band Together. So there it is.
I'm the biggest fan of Band Together out there. I love Band Together. I'm just a glutton for those resources. And what's cool is so you were mentioning resource matching, but Band Together has all the resource matching you
Exactly.
need.
Yeah. So
And so
it makes
that's great.
wilds. So that's why you want 2 because then like the only R&D facility requires a 2 match for mental. So as long as
Yep.
you have 2 allies, then your band together lets you do any of the resource matching you need, and you can ignore the rest of it. It can even let you discard attachments, but you'll probably do that with base strike instead of with whatever the hero action is. So yeah,
I
that's
love
the
it.
main reason you need 2 is for that R&D facility requirement.
And then play it solo in Mutant Genesis. And I'm just realizing, you know what? Um, doesn't Robert Kelly even get in on the Band Together action?
He
'Cause
does. Yeah.
he's an ally you control. So
Cosmo
for the
would, all those good allies for the campaign.
Cosmo, but Mutant Genesis though, you've got Robert Kelly, and then for the next 4, you've got Jubilee.
Yep.
And then for 2 of those, you also have Magneto quickly. And so it's like you are very often getting band together just really value
Really,
out of
really
it
quickly. Yeah.
so easily, so quickly, and you won't. I mean, you could be having 3 and having that last slot, be the one who's just taking hits and still never be under 3 for band together. So
Yeah, so typically
that's
I'll
great.
I'll try to have Beast and Colossus be my allies that sit on the board because
Yep,
they're going to sit on the board until you have a rapid response down, and then they're going to like dip in and out so that they can get their toughness or they can get a resource back for you. And
that's
then
awesome.
I'll try to use Kalu, Lockheed, Maria Hill, and Ironheart as my one that's going to chump every turn for someone
Yeah, just all
because
the value
yeah,
people.
2 of those draw a card. One of them is Kalu, right? So since you're like the fill player, right, you're gonna fill whatever role the team needs each turn when the encounter cards come out. You're not gonna know if you need to go all out or a push ahead, but Kalu's probably gonna find one of those 2, or the Moxie you need to trigger them, because he lets you look through the top 5 for an event, and you've got 18 events in your deck, so you should always find something. And then Lockheed, can, like we said, can just be that like flex, deal 2 damage or 2 thwart. It is a 41 card deck. I couldn't get it done to 40, so I apologize to everybody. I thought about cutting Deft Focus, and then I said, nope, there's 9 events it
No,
works with,
no,
so I have to include it.
exactly. Yeah,
But you could probably go down 1 in Moxie or like only take 1 R&D facility, but I took 2, and it's worked out so far.
that's great. That's great. Cool. That's really fun. That's one of the most fun leadership styles to me is finding a hero who really likes who has a bunch of 3 cost cards, and then matching them with like a bunch of other 3 cost cards and getting band together happening. It's so fun. Yeah, I
I've done
used to
it a
play.
lot with Cap because Heroic Strike is 3 cost and requires a resource match. And then you can play push ahead on Cap because he has like an auto ready, so
Yes.
you're already trying to pump his stats with Moxie and stuff like that.
Oh, that's
Um,
epic.
but being able
That's
to use
great.
Moxie when you flip and stay in hero form is really strong compared to like She-Hulk or Cap style flipping where you have to dip
Yes.
into alter ego.
I love it. I love it. I used to think that I was like those profiles of like types of players. I used to think I was a Timmy, I think, who likes I still have sort of that thing of I really like an unusual deck build, or like, finding that one card, like searching through the archives of all my cards to find that a pulse grenade has the attack trait, or whatever.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I like doing that sort of thing, but also just as much or more, I'm the whatever that is. Is it the Johnny, the one who likes the big,
The big
just like the
splashy.
big
Yeah.
splashy attacks. And so band together really really floats my boat on that. So
Band together
That's
and all these
fun.
Ironheart cards, you're gonna go crazy. You can
Yes,
try it out.
exactly.
Let me know how it
That's
goes. We'll
awesome.
do homework on each
Yes.
other's deck and then do an update.
Yes, wonderful.
So we're running over. That was the power of Shadowcat. We're gonna go through all 4 heroes that have been released, hopefully before Wolverine and Storm come out. So you should expect a power up episode every week this month, starting this weekend. So thanks for coming, Andy.
Great.
Anything else you
Yeah,
want to tell
thanks for
people
having
about
me.
how awesome Shadowcat is?
Oh gosh, I just yeah, get out there, be playing her, and seriously, like look up a couple. There's helpful like YouTube videos about like who is Shadowcat or whatever, or just like do a little bit of research. I think because at least for me, I wasn't knowledgeable about X-Men before Mutant Genesis, and so it's been really really fun to like, or watch a couple of the shows, like the um X-Men and the Wolverine, or what Wolverine and the X-Men.
Oh yeah, she was in that one too, right?
I think it starts off with her and Colossus running into a building and doing their things with their powers. And so there's lots of ways you can kind of get to see what she does. And I think once you like have that in mind, it's at least for me, I think most of us playing this game, like we don't play it just dryly,
Yep.
you're picturing it. So the more that you can picture what she's doing, I think the better. And yeah, get out there and have fun with these decks. There's lots of ways to play really fun and thematically with her. And so yeah, have fun. Try her in all the aspects. Well, thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for coming, and we'll see you next time.
All right, bye.